please.
Oh, I'm Gwen Hanson, and I'll have a slide for myself. There we go. I'm a solo family practice doctor in Bellevue, Washington, and I'm a group leader for the Bellevue chapter, the Citizens Climate Lobby. And I feel what you're talking about as far. I was my first CCL meeting was the one I was leading, so thank goodness I have really good members. I wanted to go to Ann's, but I couldn't because I had my own. So. Oh, and this is David Crouch. You all probably know him. He's been instrumental in helping to start the Vancouver, the Israel. He does a lot. He just came up with me to San Juan Island, where we started a new chapter up there. So he's fantastic, and he's helping me even though he's no longer in this room right now.
You guys were doing a workshop 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, we did. That was on Vancouver Island. Yeah. So I wanted to tell you about our purpose today. Oh, welcome. Can you introduce yourself, Cliff, to everybody?
Yeah, I'm Cliff Swiggett, and I came down from Seattle with Leika, and I'm happy to be here. This is really wonderful.
And Cliff has 2 concerts coming up in May.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. I don't want to take up all the year, but if somebody wants to come to the Alaska Suite, which is a way of exploring climate change, it's a story of beauty, loss, and hope. It combines music and very accurate scientific information to help people try to process what's happening to our planet and wake up. And it seems to work. And there's going to be 2 performances on the east side.
Cliff, can you at some point write it down on the whiteboard?
I will. I honestly don't know when they are, but I'm going to look it up and then I'll write them down.
Okay, because I have it on my calendar.
They are wonderful too, and you want to combine intellectual and emotion together.
Yes.
It's just amazing.
Yes.
Thanks.
Okay, so today what we want to do is introduce you to Citizens Climate Lobby. It sounds like we've been partially introduced, or some people from the Sunrise Movement might not know that much about us, and some people that are unaffiliated. And then those of us that do know something about it, want to introduce you to a little bit more detail about our philosophy of Citizens Climate Lobby. We want to demystify citizen lobbying. So we all hear about lobbyists, and as you know, most of them are paid the big bucks. And the lawmakers actually can tell the difference between the ones that come in getting paid for it and those of us that go in as volunteers. And lobbying, some of us feel intimidated about talking to our lawmakers. So we're going to show you specifically the nuts and bolts of what a meeting is like. And you'll see, it's really not scary at all, even though I was nervous in my first meeting that I went to with Ann, but it turns out to be actually very fun. So, we want to immerse you in our values. So we're going to talk more about the values of our organization. We're going to do a little bit of practicing of our methodology, and we're also going to let you get to know the legislation that we have been working towards for 10 years and has now been introduced in Congress. So first of all, we need to, I think of it this way. If you're trying to figure out climate change, it's kind of like trying to figure out what to eat these days. You think you get it right, and then you read something that says, no, that's all baloney. This is the real truth over here. And so there are things that you can debate, like for example, the type of solution and that kind of thing. But I think you guys already know, and what we want to do is make sure that the public already knows that some things about climate change are not debatable. And so we break it down. Yale Climate Communications has helped us break this down into multiple components, and I want to share those with you. These are them. It is real, and I think all of you in here agree with that. It's caused by humans. There's still a large fraction of people in this country that might agree that it's warming, but don't think it's caused by humans. That is not true. It is caused by us. Experts agree. So 97% of scientists who are currently publishing climate work agree that it's severe and it's from us. It's really, really bad. So everybody, we've all heard the doom and gloom. And so we're not going to dwell on the doom and gloom, but we are going to talk about some ways that climate change has affected each one of us. What we really want to focus on today is the last one, so that we can solve it. And I'll tell you a little tiny story. We did one of those movie viewings, like meaningful movies, and it happened to be Al Gore's second movie. And we had a bunch of people in the audience, and at the end we talked about Citizens Climate Lobby. And we just told them a little bit about what we do and what we're after. And at the end of our little presentation, there was a high school a kid that stood up and he said, I am so relieved to hear you say that. I thought there was no chance whatsoever of any solution. And this was a high school kid in Bellevue. And it's just so sad for me to think that some kids are walking around thinking we're toast. So we're going to talk a lot about how we can solve it. So for our first exercise today, what I want us to do is think about a specific place or tradition. This is very important. Cliff and I were just talking about this the other night. Basically, I think Citizens Climate Lobby has a great solution, and I think we have great methods for communicating our solution. But maybe what we're actually missing is we want a compelling story. We need people to say, oh, I love those people. They understand my values. They understand what I want for this planet. They understand what the Sunrise kids are after. We want people to know that we're not just automatons thinking we have the solution. We feel this. And so I want to start by all of us practicing to build our own stories. And so we're going to break up into groups of 2. And I want you guys to think about a specific place or tradition that you love, something that you want to be around for future generations and is threatened by our climate change. And this will get you started. And so just to begin, I'm going to tell you a little bit of my story. So when I was a kid, we moved all the time. And my dad changed jobs, so we were always moving. But my grandmother, the whole time I was growing up, stayed in the same beautiful, small but beautiful house in Miami Beach. And so that was basically my one home. And so my sister and I would walk from my grandmother's house to the beach. And it was very far, but we did it anyway. And I checked on Google Maps, it was 1.5 miles. It felt really far. So we walked out there all the time, and we'd walk on these red sidewalks, and we could walk about 4 steps before it was too hot and we had to put our flip-flops on. And then we would sneak into the neighbors' yards, I'm sorry, but this is true, and we would take little oranges or little kumquats and try to eat them, but they weren't that easy to eat. And then we'd get to the ocean, and there would be the seagulls flying around, especially if we had brought pastries, they would come right over to us. And then we loved, of course, getting into the Atlantic Ocean and that feeling that you've all probably experienced when the waves lift you up and then gently put you back down so your feet can touch the ground again. Mm-hmm. So that was a huge part of my childhood, and Miami. So I love Miami Beach, and And this is one of the streets where my sister and I walked to get to the beach on a sunny day in Miami now. So I want kids of the future to have their own great memories and to not have to be living in a big rich house to go to the beach. I want them to be able to walk from wherever they're living to go to the beach. So we're going to break up into groups of 2, and we're going to have 2 minutes each. So you're going to find your partner, and then the person with the longest hair is going to get to go first. And then after 2 minutes, I'm going to ring a very obnoxious bell like this. And after 2 minutes, you're going to switch partners, and the other person is going to tell their story. So if everybody in groups of 2 or 3 if necessary. So find your partners.
Luke, you want to go?
I can't.
You get the longest hair. You've got hair. You get to go.
Several times, and the last time we went was in 2014. And we have been here to see a huge difference. There's so
So how many people felt really connected to their partner during this storytelling? Okay. Good. That's exactly what we're looking for. So good. Thank you for sharing your stories. So before I I was implying that we are actually a warm and fuzzy organization, even though we might not always show it. And I think that it's really, really true. In order to try to persuade you of this, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we started. Marshall Saunders is the founder of Citizens Climate Lobby. And Marshall Saunders was a huge anti-poverty advocate. That's what he did. And so he spent his life trying to eradicate poverty. And I know for me, I first realized when I was like in my 40s, I always thought poverty was something that would always be with us and there was no way to get rid of it. And then I was strolling around in half-price books and I saw this book where it said, here's what you do to eradicate poverty. And then it had this little list of things, and it said things like educate women, provide clean water, provide sanitary protection so girls can continue in school and that sort of thing. And then they said the price tag on it, and it was like ridiculously small price. It was like, wow, this can actually be done. And that was the first time I ever thought poverty can be eradicated. And then you guys, how many people here have heard of microloans?
I know.
Okay, yeah. So microloans came about, and they realized that you can actually take a small amount of money and help a woman start a business that can then support her family. And that's the way that Marshall Saunders decided to go. He was really big into microloans, so much so that he received the Grameen Award, and he was the first person who wasn't a head of state to receive that award because he talked with 10,000 different people about microloans. So he was very instrumental. But at some point, Marshall Saunders started to think about climate change, and he's like, geez, I've been working for years and years to eradicate poverty, and now with climate change, the sea levels are going to rise, there's going to be island nations where they all have to move, or people in places like New Orleans, if they don't have the means to move out of New Orleans, they might get stuck over and over again in hurricanes or not have adequate housing. So he's like, oh my gosh, if I don't do something about climate change, all my work about poverty is going to be for naught. And so he decided he better do something for climate change. So he went to Al Gore's climate reality training. Have you guys heard of that? Okay. So he went to that and he started giving talks. And one of his first talks was, I think it was like at a retirement community, and it was like a really hard place to find, and it was kind of a difficult situation. So he had this audience, maybe about the same size as we are today, and he started talking about how severe climate change was and how we need to do something. And then he's like thinking, he goes, gosh, I wish we had a very effective methods like the methods of Results, an anti-poverty agency that he was working with. And then he said, but there isn't any climate group that uses those effective methods. And so an old lady in the back of the room goes, well, why don't you start one? And he just goes, oh, I guess I should. And he never saw that lady again. She started this idea, and then she didn't come to any more meetings after that.
Well, to be fair, she had some health problems.
Maybe she did, but she certainly started something. So he started with one group, and then, as we said, Ann Engstrom was actually the third group in the country. So he said, ordinary people, can somebody read that quote for us?
Ordinary people like you and me have to organize, educate ourselves, give up our hopelessness and powerlessness, and gain the skills to be effective with our government.
Thank you, Cliff. So I'm going to talk about the mission of Citizens Climate Lobby in kind of two parts. The first part is that we want to build the political will for a livable world. So how do we build political will? As Mark Reynolds, our executive director, says, politicians don't create the political will, they respond to it. So if you think that your lawmakers aren't putting climate change as a high enough priority, look at the public opinion polls and you'll see that a lot of their constituents don't put it as the highest priority either. And so I think that those of us that think that climate change kind of encompasses a lot of the other priorities like economics, education, healthcare, we need to communicate that and make sure that lots of our friends join us in telling the lawmakers that we think this is a very high priority. So this is one way to think about this, creating the political will. Just imagine that you're at a dinner party, and at the end of the party, when it's time for everybody to go home, it's pouring rain. So as the good host or hostess that you are, you would grab your biggest umbrella and start walking people out to the car so they don't get wet on the way out. And that's kind of how we want to think about what we want to do for Republican lawmakers. There's a lot of them want to do something on climate change, but they're afraid if they say certain words, they will be voted out of office. So we need to provide cover for them, get leaders in their communities, get their constituents all to tell them, if you take action on climate, we are behind you. We need to provide political cover. So the summary of that part is that our solution to climate change is democracy, and we need you on our team. So how many people think that Congress is broken? Okay. And how many people think that there are certain people in Congress that would like to take good actions and get some good work done? Right. And this is what we're hearing from the lawmakers. There are lawmakers that have told us, we want to thank you because you guys are at least acting like you believe that Congress is not broken beyond all repair. Second part of our mission, to empower people to have breakthroughs in personal and political power. I love this part. I found out how bad climate change was in about 2006 when I was reading a green issue of Vanity Fair, and I was on an airplane, like a transatlantic flight, and I was just sitting there in my chair going, oh my gosh, it's terrible, and nobody's even talking about it. And I became petrified. And so when I landed, I tried to convince my family that we would always walk if it was less than a mile, if our errand was less than a mile away. And my kids were just learning how to drive, and they were like, no way, they're driving everywhere. So I decided that I would no longer drive anywhere in the Puget Sound area unless I was carpooling. And so I've been doing that for a long time now, probably 13 years. Yeah, no. So it was helpful. I think it made me feel better because you feel better when you bike as opposed to when you drive. And it made me feel like I was doing something. But it was also very lonely because how many people here bike on the streets with cars and stuff? Yeah, you feel kind of threatened a lot. and you don't feel, so it's, but I like it, but it's not. Then I found out about Citizens Climate Lobby, leadership like Ann, and I asked all my friends to join, and they all said no. But then I just started my own group anyway, and so then all these people that cared about climate change started to come to my house, and I got a whole new set of friends. And also I started to be more of a leader, which I'm not like that because I said I'm a family doctor, but I have no staff at all because I'm not a very good boss, so I'm not into that leadership thing. So this was a real stretch for me, and so I would say I've had some breakthroughs, and I would definitely say lots of people in my group have had breakthroughs in their personal and political power, and I love to watch that happen. So how does it happen? You have to get outside your comfort zone. So here's your comfort zone. And where the magic happens is just a little bit outside of it. So that's kind of how it works. Now, we're talking about political and personal power. And I just want to clarify that that's definitely different from force. Can somebody read Charles Reich's quote right here?
When you reach out to another person through the energy or creativity within you, and the other person responds, you are exercising power. When you make somebody else do something against their will, to me, that is not power at all. That is force. And force, to me, is a negation of power. Charles Reich.
Yeah. So I just want to make that clear. Thank you for reading this. Okay, so we're going to have another exercise, and you guys can break up into groups of 2 again. And we're going to think about this. Identify a time when you have experienced a personal or political breakthrough. How did it make you feel, and what do you learn? So, like today they were talking about Lynn Fitz, who said that we should all devote 2 to 4 months per hour. I know, I was like, oh, I'm already trying. So that was a tall order. And a lot of times we do frame this in work, thinking of work. And sometimes we don't think about, well, what's the good that's going to come out of this? And I know I really like to crochet. There's a lot of things I like to do that aren't this, but there's a lot of reward too. So I want you guys to think back to a success that you've had and how that made you feel, and share that with your partner. And we're going to do the same thing with the bell again. I apologize for that, but we're going to do it anyway, okay? So break up into groups of 2, please. Does anybody want to share your breakthrough with the group? Would anybody like to share? Yes.
Yeah, mine came in 1981 when Reagan became president and started talking about fighting nuclear war. The Nation published a letter from the British activist E.P. Thompson about nuclear weapons and nuclear war, and it just made me really think about it. I mean, I'd grown up with all that in the 50s and 60s, but this was just like really immediate. He was talking, and Reagan, they were talking about war fighting, deploying new missiles, and from that we had the nuclear freeze movement. Which brought millions of people out. That was the political will that was created on the streets that forced them. They didn't deploy the Pershing missiles. I think they scaled back the MX missiles. I forgot some of the details. But within 5 years, Reagan was negotiating the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty with Gorbachev. So that was a 180-degree turnaround. I mean, that to me said, you can do it.
Yes.
And with climate change, we have the same issues, but we have to build that political will.
Yes. Thank you. Yes.
And someone said today, it's at the local level.
Yeah.
So really, that it's going to bubble up.
Mm-hmm. Especially, yes, I think some of that. Yes, good. Thank you. Anybody else want to share your story? Yeah. One more person. So just you. You're it.
Thank you. We were just talking at the very end before the bell rang that what you shared about the umbrella and the cover was kind of a political and personal breakthrough, because it's this idea of, looking at it not as an adversarial approach, like you're talking to somebody as the enemy or the person you need to convert or change their mind or whatever, but how do you offer them cover and offer them something that they need to be able to converse more effectively. And it was a super strong image that will hopefully stick with me in terms of this breakthrough being like, hey, not what do I need to be able to convince them, or stronger facts, more force or whatever, but this power approach being like, hey, if I can offer you cover, what do you need to be able to communicate.
Oh, good. Excellent. Good. Thank you. Okay, so what do you all see in this picture?
A wall.
The wall in the corner.
The wall's going to crumble.
Okay, so April saw plants immediately, so she is a natural citizens climate lobby person. That's optimism, looking at the bright side. And I know a lot of you also saw those in the brick wall. It's amazing how plants can do that. We're going to talk about CCL successes. So in about 2014 or so, if you were a Republican in the Congress and you said the word climate, you would pretty much get primaried out. And around then I met with Adam Smith, my congressman, for the first time. And when we talked about climate, he was like this. It was like he was working in a war zone in Congress. And if you even say climate, everybody tenses up to, wait, oh no, what's going to happen? It was kind of scary. I met with him recently, and it has to be bipartisan. He's completely changed his body language, so it's really nice. But anyway, one of the volunteers, J.B. Terra, one of the volunteers at Citizen Climate Lobby, somehow got it in his head that he was going to go to Florida, which he had never been to before, and he was going to try to get legislators in Florida, which is already experiencing the flooding, as we know, to try to start a bipartisan climate solutions caucus, because in the past Congress had these climate groups, but they were all full of Democrats, so of course Republicans were afraid to walk in the room. So he wanted to start a bipartisan one. That was so difficult that it took him 2 years to get the first 2 members, one Republican and one Democrat, Carlos Curbelo and Ted George. So 2 years to get 2 people talking to each other. So that was an incredible success, though, when he started the caucus. And by 2018, there were 45 Republicans and 45 Democrats. So once the dam was broken, yay, we got all these conversations going. So, so that's one of our successes. And then this is showing some state and local resolutions endorsing carbon fee and dividend. And so Bellingham has endorsed, Portland has endorsed, and the entire legislature in California has endorsed our plan for national legislation. So that was beautiful, and you can see all over the country, there's lots of them.
We just got Bainbridge Island last week, 2 weeks ago.
Just got what?
Just got Bainbridge Island 2 weeks ago, so we got
Oh, thank you, buddy. Congratulations. That's fantastic. We need to update this map. Okay. I know he's so cute, isn't he? True though. Okay, so how many people here know that Canada has enacted our policy, carbon fee and dividend?
Yay!
Yay! It's so exciting. As a matter of fact, the way our policy is designed, it's a fee and dividend, so there's a tax put on carbon and then all the revenue is returned to people. But the way it's designed is you get your first check before the tax is imposed, and the Canadians and the provinces where this is going to take effect are going to get their first check this month. Yes. And the provinces that are going to have this policy are all the provinces that didn't already have their own carbon tax. So because British Columbia has had a carbon tax since 2008, I believe, they don't need to do it, but all the other provinces will. Yes?
So what's happening, you know, we have the Canadian oil coming down, so theoretically. So how are they going to handle that?
Well, that's a great question. So this is not, our policy is not a regulation. So we're not saying you can't do this, you have to do that. What we're saying is, here's price signal. If you guys can still make money doing this stuff, go for it. But eventually, more and more of that kind of business is just going to go out of business because of financial. Like even right now, the cost of solar energy is approaching the cost of transmission of dirty energy. So even if you had free dirty energy, if you're just trying to transmit it from place to place, you can't compete with solar. So, you know, economically, we're going to phase that stuff out. So.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Can I share on the French news? They were just all over this Canadian thing that passed, and I just took a screenshot of the average savings per family.
Yes.
So this is an estimate in Ontario. The average family will pay $244 in extra fees. The check back will be $300.
Yes.
In New Brunswick, $202 paid in extra fees, $248 back. In Manitoba, $232 paid, $336 back. And in Saskatchewan, $403 paid in extra taxes, $598 back. So some of the provinces are going to get an extra $100 and almost $200 back in Saskatchewan. It's huge. 403 to 598.
So this is the French news outlet?
On the French news, TV5, they are all into.
Sorry. Oh, I was just asking if you could email that.
Oh, you bet.
Oh,
Yeah,
actually,
absolutely.
can you write that, like the source, instead of emailing it to just the...
Let's see. Well, I wrote, I mean, this is just a picture I took
Okay.
of the screen.
Okay, that's
So I don't know.
exciting.
I mean, I'll happily email it to anybody or text it to anybody.
Okay, you
So
can do that, yeah.
I think that'd
Yeah,
be easier.
okay.
Just check with me later if you want to.
Thank you for
Picture
telling
of
us.
that.
I wish the American news covered this stuff a little bit more.
No, it was nowhere on American news, but the French news picked it up, so.
Yeah, I mean, I found out about the Canadian policy from Citizens Climate Lobby. If I had counted on the news, I would have thought everything was doom and gloom still.
Could you text it to Gwen, and Gwen can shift it out?
That's a
or-
good idea. I'll give you my card, because I want to talk to you anyway. 'Cause
Oh, sure.
You probably are French somewhere.
So this is
You pass this to her.
SCIGG.
Okay.
C Swigga, just
Oh, see.
So for Citizens Climate Lobby in the United States, our big news is that our bill has been introduced after 10 years of work, and you heard about that from Louise Stonington. Yay! So exciting.
This is from my presenter? Okay.
Does everybody know what's in the bill? Can somebody say one of the features of the bill? Anybody? Mike?
So there's really 4 things. Rising price on carbon over a number of years keeps going up, so it's a steady rise. Take all the money and rebate it to American families. Those are the 2 key things. And then there's 2 sort of wonky things that are kind of side things. The border adjustment makes trade fair. So if you're going to a country that doesn't have a carbon fee, you get it back, so your it levels the playing field. If it's coming in from a country that doesn't have a carbon fee, it's assessed at the border, so it adjusts trade and makes it even. And then the fourth thing is the EPA regulatory clause. So EPA has authority under the Clean Air Act to regulate greenhouse gases as a pollutant. And they haven't actually taken action on that, but they have the authority. This pauses that authority because we believe this policy is going to actually be more effective. They can still regulate the gases or, effect on asthma or, clean water and all that sort of thing. They just can't regulate them as greenhouse gases as for climate effect on climate.
And we're passing around a little flyer that has all the information on it. And you can take one, or you can take more than one, or you can take 0 depending on your needs. We'll use them for other groups if you don't take it. Thank you for being an expert on the subject. That was helpful. Did you have something to add to it?
No.
Okay.
Just a quick question, is it
Marcia, you got
agricultural
plenty, right?
use exempted? What are the exemptions?
Yes, agriculture and
Oh,
military.
no, I'm almost out of
All
those.
agricultural, all military is exempt.
Yeah.
And what's the thought?
I got
Like
the old ones.
21% of our greenhouse global gas emissions comes from agriculture, so if it's exempted.
But I'm not sure all that is from the fuel that they're actually using. So we're exempting the fuel that they're using for tractors and combines to basically be able to keep competitive, in the market. But I think a lot of, when you talk about 21% coming from agriculture, I think a lot of it is on
Land
the
use
land use
and
and methane from trucks or from cows and so forth, right? So that isn't directly affected here yet either. So I mean, what we say is, I think it's 90% of emissions are actually covered. So we've made some compromises. Part of them are political, to be able to get, I think the military part of Boeing is excluded, so it's.
Yes.
$15 a ton fee is a little wonky. Translate that to what am I going to pay in price per gallon of pump?
15 cents.
Okay.
I've heard anywhere from 11 cents to 15 cents.
Yeah. The other thing to know about this price too is that the $15 per ton, that goes on for several, the $15 is at the beginning and then it goes up by $10 per year. But then after a couple of years, if we're not meeting our emissions reductions goals, then the rise is going to go up to $15 per ton. I like that.
Per year.
Per year. And then the other good thing is that when it was reintroduced in 2019, they added some increases for inflation, so it'll go up in dollars of that year. So that makes it go up a little bit faster, and that lets us get closer to where we want to be. Yeah.
And what is the regulatory cost?
So basically, you can't. They're saying you can't regulate what's already in the bill, and so you can't just start regulating carbon dioxide. But the thing is that there's no regulation. Like for example, if you take the Clean Power Plan, that was a regulation. Clean Power Plan, Obama's plan. That was a regulation that got stopped in the courts and it never was enacted. But even if that went through, our policy is 7 times more effective. So if you're saying, okay, we can't do these little tiddly things because we have this big thing, it's worth it. This is better. Even President Obama likes our plan better than the Clean Power Plan. He just knew it wasn't political.
So it's a regulatory cost because that's not as effective as this.
It's also
and because we're giving something away. We're saying, okay, we're going to free these corporations from all these regulations that are very expensive to put up with, and because we're going to put in this economic measure that's more effective and easier for people to understand.
we're going to trust the price signal,
Exactly.
and it does affect the Clean Air Act.
Yeah, it does affect the Clean Air Act, it's true. Yes. Anybody else? Okay. So this is what the bill will accomplish. It will reduce our emissions by 40% within the first 12 years and 90% by 2050. So it's going to be very effective. All of the things that we worry about will be less severe. It will improve health and save lives. This is not a pie in the sky we hope and we think and it might. No, it's not like that. There have been studies where they looked at places that had a temporary halt in pollution, either because the Olympics were coming and they had to get traffic off the road or because a plant was closed. And they looked at what happened to people's health when that temporary change in the pollution happened. There are actually fewer premature births right away,
Whoa,
as soon as the pollution goes down.
whoa.
And why do we care about premature births? Does anybody, I mean, there's a lot of reasons.
Premature births are expensive, and that's just the dollar sign part of it.
You're right, I'm
High
sure if you're
mortality.
That's just getting
high
started.
mortality.
Yeah.
Also, like
Learning
neurological,
disorders.
exactly, learning disorders. So it has, pollution has been linked to attention deficit disorders, and now they're just starting to find some evidence that it might even be linked to autism. It's not the vaccines. It's not the vaccines.
This is CO2?
Yeah. Well, actually, not just CO2. So no, here we're talking about pollution.
Oh.
So we're talking about like small particulate matter and the other pollutants that come out. And those are the things, so those are the local effects that, you know, even before we fix climate change, we're going to immediately get health effects from the lower pollution that our bill is going to cause by making your gas 11 to 15 cents more expensive.
One of those unintended costs, right?
Okay, here's another one. It says it's going to create 2.1 million jobs over the first 10 years. I want to tell you something about this. The way this was analyzed, they looked only at direct effects. So basically they know that if you put the extra money that you were so kind to tell us about in people's pockets, they're going to go spend it. They're going to go to the movies, or they're going to go to the restaurant, or they're going to go to a store if there's any stores left and buy things. So they're going to spend that money. And that's what they're talking about with the 2.1 million new jobs. Now, they did not calculate the indirect effects. So the indirect effects, as soon as, like, if you're a government and you say, I'm going to spend $10 on fossil fuel infrastructure, or I'm going to spend it on clean energy and public transportation and retrofitting buildings, take that choice. The $10 you spend on fossil fuel energy is not going to get you very many jobs. Maybe not $10, but you know what I mean, the money there. But the same amount of money spent on the clean economy will get you a lot more jobs. That is not even taken into account there. So we will be spurring a lot of jobs, in my opinion. This is definitely what's shown. Yeah.
A quick question about public transportation. Is any part of this bill covering like what would increase or decrease potentially if you're using public transportation because you're still emitting, but like say you take the bus versus?
That is a great question.
Well, I think what happens is you reduce your carbon footprint so you get to keep more of the money that you get. If you're still driving your car, as the price of gasoline's going up, it's gonna consume that check that you're getting.
So yeah, so I think the answer to your question is yes, because what they're saying is that as soon as you have this price signal, it changes behaviors. And so that's what's going to drive the whole thing, whether it's your behavior about how you get places or whether it's companies' behaviors about, like Microsoft, did you guys read that they just decided to get all their energy from Chelan, clean energy? So Puget Sound Energy is going to lose out on this.
Darn.
So sad. Yeah. And our bill is bipartisan. Our bill was introduced in a bipartisan fashion in both the House of Representatives and the Senate in 2018. It has now been reintroduced in a bipartisan fashion in the House of Representatives this year, and we are
29.
29, yeah.
30 as of this morning. 30 as of this morning.
30, yeah. And there's only one Republican, which is kind of scary, I know, but I think that, you know, the dam has to break, and I think when that Republican starts to get company, it's going to flow. Because I know from Carlos Curbelo has said that how do you ask him how are you going to get more Republicans, he's a Republican lawmaker who's just retired, how are you going to get more Republicans to do this? And he said, they want to already. They talked to him about it, they want to, but we're still working on holding that umbrella and making them know that the umbrella is there.
Is it gonna drop in the Senate? Is that still?
Yeah, we have our optimistic is that it drops in the Senate before our June 9th conference in Washington, D.C., but that's very optimistic. It might be a little later than June.
Okay.
But we certainly are working on it. So. Okay, so this is a hard thing because I think that when you talk to climate justice folks, like they really want us to go talk to everybody and have everybody sit down at a table together and come up with a solution. And how many people here have read Naomi Klein's This Changes Everything? Okay. So I think This Changes Everything, she kind of paints that picture of how the world should be. And you know, I just read it and I just fell into the book and said, I love it. This is where I want to be. This is where I want to live. Or Ecotopia, I had that right in my backpack. That's another one. I want everything perfect. But the thing is that if we literally like interview everybody and try to come to a consensus, how long is that going to take? And you know, the IPCC says 12 years to get it done, not to get it started, to get it done. So we have to work fast. And so in the IPCC report, amidst all the really, really scary stuff that they said in October of 2018, they said price on carbon is central to the prompt mitigation. And they said at least $135 per ton of carbon dioxide equivalent by 2030. So they're telling us they can't think of another way to do it. You have to have a price on carbon. And with our Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, it can arrive at 140 by 2030 if it's enacted in 2019. And so that's, we're getting close. We are not saying this is the only thing we want done. We want lots of things done.
Yeah.
This is a great first step, though. So, and we hope the climate justice community will join us, and we want to join them. Yeah.
How do people deal with the oil lobby? I mean, where does that come up in the conversation? Or
well, we know that's a big issue because that's how a lot 1631 got defeated in Washington State. I think that the one thing that the oil people want is they kind of would like to know have predictability. And so there are oil companies that have signed on to a policy that's quite similar to ours, put up by the Republican Climate Leadership Council, because they just want to know, okay, how much is the price per ton of carbon dioxide and how much is it going to go up? Because it would be really hard for them if every state has regulations, and that's why they fought so hard against 1631. They don't want to have a different rule in every state. So, I don't know.
They just want to be able to predict.
They want to be able to predict, and they don't want to have a whole bunch of different rules.
And they don't want it to go too high.
They don't want it to go too high. And that's the beauty of ours compared to the Climate Leadership Councils. Theirs starts at 40, but then it only goes up by, maybe a little, and maybe 1%. Whereas ours has a very strong elevation each year.
I did hear that Ceres got the Shell stockholders are very concerned about the risks climate change on their stock prices, and so they have asked Shell to get busy with a plan.
Shell has broken with a lot of the other oil companies, and I think it's kind of like the dam breaking, kind of like the Republicans signing on. I think it's a very big deal. And one of the women from Ceres, which I don't remember her name, but she gave our talk last month.
And Kelly?
Ann Kelly, thank you.
Yeah.
We should know that, Mike.
Yeah.
She's almost like your name. She gave we have international speakers on our calls every month, and she was one of my favorite to listen. And you can always, if you go to the Citizens Climate Lobby website, you can find all of our past speakers, and I can't say enough good things about them. They're just fabulous. So.
They are, and you can go down the bottom of the page, monthly meetings and speakers, and find that, and it's a great link.
Yeah, very, very inspiring. So this is basically the bottom line is that our bill is good. Sorry, it's a busy. Don't worry about it. Our bill is very good for people of limited income. And the reason is really pretty simple. Everybody pays more depending on what their carbon footprint is, but everybody gets back the same amount. So if you have a small house or small apartment, and you have just one car, or you just don't go on too many international trips, your carbon footprint is smaller, so you're more likely to get back more than you pay in a carbon tax. And this slide is just kind of showing you that. This is basically the average tax burden based on quintile of wealth. So you can see the tax burden is a lot smaller for the lowest quintiles of poverty, and then it's a lot higher for the highest quintile. And it breaks it down and it shows you why the people that are in the lowest quintile are paying a lot less. Does anybody have any questions about that?
So that's the cost of the fee?
Yeah.
Okay, but it doesn't net out dividend?
No.
Okay.
So you gave us really valuable information with that Canadian.
I guess I have a little skepticism about it. If I'm a middle class, middle age, reasonable income person, and I see the price of fuel raising, I think I'll go buy that new Prius I've been talking about. If I'm a lower income, working person, I'm probably driving a 7-year-old Chevy. It's not the most fuel efficient thing in the world.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure I see where that logic is there.
In other words, it's gonna be harder for you to switch.
Yeah, tougher, yeah, it is. Yeah, lower income,
But-
tougher to
but-
make that switch.
It's also gonna be a little less important for you to switch because you're not paying as much in carbon tax, so it's not like you have to switch.
I don't know, as a percentage of my income, look at 173 versus 381.
Mhm.
As a percentage of my income, that gasoline is pretty good science.
Well, I have another answer for you.
No.
I met a young man, his name is Adam Maxwell, and I hope he's still doing this, he was doing this at the time. He started a company called Maxwell Vehicles, and it was a company that would take your old van and cheaply convert it into a hybrid, not electric, but hybrid. That would get like 300 miles per gallon.
What?
So, I know, it was amazing.
Is this like the fish carburetor?
Don't ask me.
Yeah.
But the point here is, I think that if all of a sudden there's this market for people that have old cars, but they can't afford the gas anymore, then more people like Adam Maxwell will pop up and be successful in their kind of weird business. What we think of today as a weird business would become more of a mainstream business as that happened.
So one point really quick, there's a bunch of, in Bellevue, they sold more Nissan Leafs than they've sold at any dealership on the planet. There are a bunch of used Nissan Leafs in Bellevue.
I own one.
You own them?
Bought it used.
They're pretty cheap.
They are.
So did I.
So I went down to Eric
Yeah.
Heidegger and I talked to him about that. He's in my Congress
Right.
legislator. And he said, hey, nobody can afford these things.
Yeah.
And I said, well, actually, they're really cheap. They're cheaper than my beater Ford Focus. You know, and he didn't know that. It's not like there's a perfect solution, but I think there is a communications gap that sometimes this stuff actually is cheaper. Sometimes you actually can switch. And there's no panacea here. It needs to take time, but there are little cheeks in the armor of that argument that I think are
Okay.
legitimate, especially if you own one. You know what a great car is.
I do, but I've got the money to be able to do it.
But a used Leaf in Seattle right now, like a 2015 Leaf is going for about $8,000 or $9,000.
Yeah.
Get out of town.
That's cheap.
That's, if you go out in the parking lot at lunchtime, yeah, find my burgundy Leaf in the parking lot that has a little note on the dashboard that tells you just that, and how cheap it was, and how cheap the cost is.
That's good. Okay, right here, we have another comment.
So I just want to address this. So for the people who are lower income,
Yeah.
they're getting more money every month. So if they have no change in behavior, they're stuck with their car, they're stuck with their house or apartment, they can't make any change, but they're getting a little bit more money every month. So to them, it's not like a bad thing. So many
Yeah, I don't
people,
love this chart because it's showing the tax impact without the dividends.
Yeah.
And that, I think, ends up being, right, so this is what you pay, but it doesn't say what you get back.
so, yeah, so we really face a communication issue on explaining how this works. So like,
This-
for millions of people, you might not change your behavior at all, especially at first. Maybe 15 cents a gallon, you don't think about it too much, but guess what? 3-4 years down the road, when you are in a position you gotta replace your car, hey, maybe you're gonna make a different decision than you would have made otherwise.
Yep. Thank you for,
Good.
that was a really good analysis.
Yeah.
This slide shows a little bit more of it too. This is showing households benefited by the policy or having just a minor loss. And you can see that the white people have a little bit less likelihood of coming out ahead, whereas Latino and Black and Asian have a little bit of a higher chance of that. So it's an equitable policy.
Keep those white Midwesterners voting Republican.
Well, some of them,
Some of them are in the 47%.
yeah,
most
still,
of them.
most of them will
Yeah.
still do well. So. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit more about how we build the political will, so a little bit more about the techniques of how citizens climate lobby is effective. And as I said before, Marshall Saunders got these techniques from results that did a very, very good job increasing anti-poverty policy in Congress way back when that has made a significant difference as worldwide poverty has decreased, partly thanks to Results, the organization that has the same methods that I'm going to share with you right now. So first of all is lobbying, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that at the end. So that's meeting with our lawmakers. Next is media relations. How many people here have ever submitted at least one letter to the editor? Hey,
Just
excellent.
last month, I did my first.
Oh, congratulations. How many people have had one published? Terrific. Fantastic. How many people have submitted more than 30 letters to the editor? Anybody?
And not gotten published.
These guys are a lot published. I've seen them in the newspaper, and I've seen yours too. So good job. I think personally, I use my letters to the editor, which I write tons of, as a therapy, because I just feel better when I write one. I know it's not going to get accepted, but I feel better. They're fun. It's not a one-way street, that newspaper. Grassroots outreach, so that would include things like this today, reaching out to people. And also, since it is Earth Day, we in our group, we have a lot of events coming up, I'm sure you do too, where basically if there's a get-together like a farmer's market or a bike race or something like that, you can set up a table and have signs up like that sign and this banner, and just kind of tell people that if they want to do something for climate change, we have work for them. So get people to sign up.
And concerts, and climate science on tap, and climate science on tap.
That's right.
Oh, we love those.
Yes.
That's the best way to go.
I've heard such good things about that. That was amazing. And your concert, which I can't wait to see.
Music.
Grass Tops Outreach. Does anybody know what that is?
Your influencers.
Exactly. So you're going to influence the influencers. This is very, very important. This is part of the umbrella piece. So it's not always easy, but we try to meet people that are in important positions like owners of companies and that kind of thing, and lawmakers and religious leaders, and try to talk to them and see where they stand, what do they care about when it comes to climate, and try to develop a relationship with them. And then chapter development. So like a lot of you have said you're either a group leader or co-group leader. Raise your hand if you're like, okay. Good. And raise your hand if you're a future group leader.
Want a bet?
So will somebody read this quote by Andrew Carnegie, please?
Teamwork is the ability to work together toward a common vision, the ability to direct individual accomplishments toward organizational objectives. It is the fuel that allows common people to attain uncommon results. Andrew Carnegie.
I love this. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so why do we gather? Why are we all here together? And one reason is because we want to do things, we want to accomplish things that we're unable to accomplish alone. We need each other. So,
Can I give one piece of feedback?
yes.
There's a lot of great quotes about teamwork, and one that's not from a major white industrialist would be just a little opportunity.
Good point. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Great
Margaret
quote.
Mead. They will do Margaret Mead.
Yeah, Margaret Mead, yeah.
So just to let you know, like all the teams that we just talked about, they all work together, obviously, so like we're in silos. So like the lobby team, like a lot of times when we go in to meet a lawmaker, we might bring like a whole stack of letters written by constituents that we collected at the farmer's market. And it's impressive. When you walk in with a whole stack of things, they're like, oh, I didn't know people in my district cared. And we're like, yep, here's these children and grown-ups and everybody who wrote these letters. So that really is effective. And then for the Grass Tops team, like for when you're talking to people at the farmer's market or giving a presentation, you never know who might be in your audience, so that can help. And this is the website. Citizens Climate Lobby National is a pretty amazing organization. Basically, as soon as the bill dropped in 2018, they had a conference call where there were thousands of us on it.
I was on it.
It was great.
It was so exciting.
It was amazing. And they had this website up and running immediately too. So this is just an example. If you're in this organization, you get a lot of help from National. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit more about talking to your lawmakers, okay? So one thing about lawmakers is how do they get where they are? They like to talk, okay? They really like to talk. So you want to be interested instead of interesting. So a lot of times to prepare for talking to lawmakers, you think of all the points you want to get across. But a lot of times you really want to go in there and learn what's important to them, what made them upset about climate change, what are they hearing from their constituents. So I think, does anybody in this room think that they have anything that they want to work on as far as listening skills?
Yeah.
Say what?
Never can listen well enough. So we always have to work on that. And this is the Japanese symbol for listening, and it shows that you have to use your ears, your whole body, your eyes, undivided attention, and your heart to really listen. So we're going to talk a little bit about meeting with your member of Congress, and we might, I don't know if we'll have time, we might have time, we'll see. We might have time for a little exercise, we might not. So as I said, it's not nearly as scary as you think. So the first thing is that whenever you're going to have a meeting with your member of Congress, you have a meeting ahead of time to plan for it. And I've been in meetings with you guys, and you're always really nervous. And but when you have like somebody brilliantly brings an agenda, and then you get a role that's been assigned to you, and that makes it easier because you know you don't have to do the whole thing. You just have to do one part of it. So. And then we have a lot of roles, and there's always not always a person for each role, but we try. So there's a leader of the meeting who is often the liaison, and Mike is a liaison. Do you want to tell them just a little bit what it means to be a liaison, Mike?
It means you just build a relationship with the office, and especially both the member but also the staffer, because the staffers are sometimes more important on issues if they really influence what the member thinks. So.
Good, yeah. So, and then there's an appreciator. This is a fun job. One person gets to check their basically Facebook page or Twitter page and find out what they did recently that we like. And there's always something. Like everybody has done something that you like. So you find that very specific thing, hopefully recent, and then you thank them when you first get the meeting. And they love it when you thank them right off the bat. You're not coming in there angry with your fist up. You're thanking them. Then we have the timekeeper is really important too. That's what I'm trying to be a good timekeeper for you guys. It's always uncomfortable if somebody has to be somewhere else and you're still, droning on and on. It's miserable. So you want a timekeeper to ask them at the beginning, how long do we have for the meeting? And they'll be the ones to warn at the end and say, okay, we're almost out of time. And note taker. Okay, so the note taker role is very difficult. What I think you should really try to do as a note taker is try to watch the lawmaker, body language, what they're saying, and try to feel like what's their emotional response to what's going on. And the other thing the note taker has to do is try to be very alert to anything that somebody promises to do. Like if the lawmaker says something, he'll do something for you, you want to write that down. And if you promise him something, you better write it down and not forget to follow through. And then there's all these other roles. Somebody has to do the follow-up, and there has to be a photographer. If the lawmaker says it's okay, you want to get a picture with the lawmaker at the end.
I forgot that last one.
Oh, sorry. And then the observer can also pick up on things that the other people have missed. And then this is what when I first meetings I really like this. There's no grandstanding in these meetings, so you are in there as a team. You're not trying to make yourself look like the smartest person on climate. And so when I was really struck by my first meeting with Member of Congress, which was Maria Cantwell's staff with Ann Engstrom, how everybody was very politely encouraging others to talk and listening when they talked, and nobody was trying to be too aggressive at saying their two cents for them. Constituents should get top priority, so if you don't have enough constituents, you can have some other people come to the meeting, but they really prefer to talk to their constituents. And the basic meeting outline is here. So the middle part is where you can really learn a lot about your lawmaker. And then at the end, you do want to have an ask and a secondary ask. So you want to make sure the lawmaker knows what you want, what you're after, even though you have to be a listener, but you also want to be clear on what you're going in there for.
Ask lots of questions. Mark was saying we need to ask at least 3 questions before we start.
That's a good point. And really listen to the answers. And then you do want to debrief the meeting. So this usually takes place right outside the Member of Congress's office, and you all just get in a huddle and congratulate yourselves, and also talk about what was effective, what would you change, and what is your biggest takeaway. And we really do this, and it's really helpful. Okay, good. Actually, let me see how we're doing for time. Not great. Okay, I thought we were doing great, but we're not. we're doing okay. We're right on schedule. So I'm gonna tell you this a little bit about this. Basically, making the transition off of fossil fuels is as big as the women's suffrage movement or the abolishment of slavery. So as you know, huge movements that took a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to get done. And I'm going to tell you a story about the women's suffrage movement. After decades, the 19th Amendment giving the women the right to vote already went through Congress, and it just needed to be ratified by the states. And they were running out of time. I guess there's a time limit on these things. And so they were running out of time, and they just needed one more state. And Tennessee was one of the ones they were trying to work on, but they were pretty sure that Tennessee was going to vote no. And then what happened is that a guy named Harry Byrne, a Tennessee legislator, unexpectedly cast the tie-breaking vote. He voted for it because his mother wrote him a really long letter saying he needed to vote for this.
Wow.
And he actually held that letter in his hand as he cast the tie-breaking vote. So we think we're at that place today where there's going to be some Republican lawmaker out there who's going to be kind of like, political career, go with the flow, or do what my daughter said. And so we think we're approaching that point, and it could be somebody you know, one of your family members, one of your friends, that could influence one of these lawmakers and make all the difference so we can pass groundbreaking climate legislation. So I hope you think about that. So anyway, we're thinking about what are your next steps. So remember, 2 to 4 months every hour. That's how much I want y'all to work. So these are some possible next steps. And that's the contact information. And thank you so much for participating today.
Good.